Fruit, a noun. Apples preserved, stewed, or made into sauce. 1926, Wilson, Cullowhee word list equals apples. We have lots of fruit this year, but no peaches. 1939, Hall Collection, White Oak, North Carolina. Will you have some of this fruit? 1973, Great Smoky Mountain National Park. A lot of times we'd have applesauce. We called it fruit. 1973, Medford Long Hard Road. Apples back in the old days contributed a big part to the family living. It was just spoke of as fruit. You didn't call it applesauce. Apples fit into every meal, as well as to eat raw between meals and at night as we sat around the fire. They were dried, smoked, treated with sulfur, or bleached. They were made into apple butter, jelly, cider, as well as pies of all kinds and fried pies made from dried apples. They were canned and baked, as well as stewed. Most tempting to me was to bite into one raw. That's the entry from the Dictionary of Smoky Mountain English for the word fruit. Granny and Pap used the word fruit exactly like the dictionary entry. I can just hear Granny. She'd call me and she'd say, "Your daddy had me open a jar of fruit and he's made a pan of fried taters and the biscuits are just about done. Won't you come down here and eat dinner with us?" Well, you know I never turned down a meal like that. I always went and ate dinner with them. But apples are huge in the foodways of Appalachia. From that first June apple that ripens in midsummer to the fall varieties that cover the hillsides, they are just loved. Traditional methods of preserving apples that are still used today are drying, making applesauce or fruit, canning, freezing, making jelly and apple butter. Of course, there's apple pies and fried pies and the famous Appalachian stack cake that uses dried apples for its filling. And one method that was used in the old days that I don't hear anyone, or I don't know of anyone that's used it today, maybe there's somebody out there still using it, but was to dry apples with sulfur. So they would pack apples in a barrel or a container, and then they would light a small amount of sulfur, and that would sort of smoke and preserve the apples. So I've heard folks say those apples, those sulfured apples, sometimes they called them bleached apples, because that process would turn the apples really white somehow. They would say, I've heard folks say they were so good they tasted just like a fresh apple. You couldn't tell the difference. But I've heard other people say, well, no, they didn't taste as good as a fresh apple, but they sure were good when they were cooked up, stewed, or fried on a cold winter's day. Making apple butter each year turned into a sort of celebration. The pot had to constantly be stirred and the fire had to be constantly watched to make sure it didn't go out. So they would invite a lot of people over, and then they could take turns stirring the pot, and they could take turns watching the fire. And so if it wasn't your turn, you could fellowship one with another. They would have food, as you know, any kind of get-together would have, and just enjoy being together, but also making apple butter, getting something done. Today, most people that make apple butter, they use a crock pot, and they let it cook down in it. And that way you don't have to worry about the fire, and you don't have to worry about stirring the mixture constantly to keep it from scorching. So it's kind of a solitary affair today, whereas in days gone by it was one that everybody would get together. It's kind of sad, but with our modern lives, that's just how it goes. I wanted to read you an excerpt from John Paris about making apple butter. The autumn wind was in her snow-white hair that day. She stirred a great black iron pot over a hickory-fed fire. The smell of the wood smoke blended with the spicy smell of apples cooking. Grandma was making apple butter. In the autumn ritual had gone long hours spent in peeling and preparing the choice apples from Grandpa's trees that went creeping up the hillside in the back of the house. Grandma stirred the boiling apples with a long wooden paddle. Grandpa had made it for her. He had whittled it and shaped it out of a piece of hickory with his pocket knife. Grandma said that Grandpa could make anything he set his mind to. "He's right smart with his hands," she would say. "Nobody makes a better churn. He's always whittling something. Makes a nice butter mold, too." While Grandma was stirring away at the boiling, bubbling apples, stirring round and round, Grandpa sat whittling under the big oak. Every now and then he would lay aside his work and tend to the fire. Grandpa looked after the fire and Grandma looked after the stirring. Between them, they turned out a rich and tasty product that was considered well worth the effort. Don't you just wish you could go visit that grandma and grandpa? I sure do. I'd like to go back with them and help them make apple butter. That'd just be a real treat. My favorite Appalachian story about sulfur in apples comes from Sidney Saylor Farr. This excerpt I'm going to read now is from a book which she wrote, one of her cookbooks, which is my favorite Appalachian cookbook. More Than Moonshine is the name of it. In addition to drying and canning apples, Father also made sulfured apples. I shall always remember the first year he did them. It had been a sticky hot day in August with clouds that moved sluggishly and looked like great wads of used chewing gum. Father brought in some barrels and boxes of sulfur from the store. Mother, my sister Della Mae, and I were set to peeling and cutting the apples for him. Father put the barrels in the smokehouse, which was empty at that time of the year. The smell of burning sulfur drifted out, and the evening air carried it all through the house and the yard. Along about dusky dark, a bad storm come up, with lightning and rolling thunder bouncing from the mountain tops. The storm struck the orchard. Some apple trees were uprooted, others had limbs broken off, and apples, even green ones, blanketed the ground under the remaining trees. We went to bed with the smell of the rain-wet earth and the sulfur from the smokehouse still around us. Late in the night, Father called to us from the front porch, and we all tumbled out of bed. I thought that daylight had come until I saw how strange it looked outside. Lights, first yellow, then blue and red, moved over the hills. Father said it might be the end of the world, and Mother leaned against the porch railing, praying aloud. After a while, the lights died down, and it was dark again. I learned that the strange phenomenon was called the aurora borealis, but people on Stony Fork spoke of the northern lights for years. That was the only time I ever saw the aurora borealis in our part of the country. The thunder and lightning, the smell of the sulfured apples, followed by the unearthly lights, all made an impression that will always linger in the recesses of my mind. I think Farr really captures old Appalachia in that piece about sulfur and apples. First, there's the tradition of her family working together to put up food for the winter ahead. Then there's the storm that left so much damage. When you live close to the land, you depend on that bounty. It's somehow when a storm comes, it just impresses upon your mind, if it's a bad one that tears up stuff. It just seems extra harsh, and the damage done to a lush summer landscape it just seems drastic in your mind and shocking to your system, especially when you know you were dependent on the food, whether it be those apples that fell off, like in her experience, or maybe if the corn all gets blowed down. I know that's happened to Pap and Granny before. So it's just a shocking experience to go through when you live close to the land. Then there's the talk of the end of the time or the end of the world. There's a common theme in old Appalachia. In some areas, like mine, it's still here in certain circles. Because Appalachia is a religious area of the world, the thought of the end of time, for those who believe, is often in the back of their minds when something drastic happens, like it did to Farr's family. And it's only natural that when something drastic like that happens, your mind goes to that place. I've heard about the end of time since I was a small girl. As a child, every time I heard the grown-ups talking about the end of time, I got scared a little. Not really scared as much as mad, because I thought, I don't want the world to end. How could the world end? I need to have a boyfriend. I need to get to go courting before that happens. As a middle-aged adult, I realize it's quickly approaching, whether it's just for me or if it is for the entire world all at once. I can't believe I just turned 50. I just had a birthday, and I still feel like I'm about maybe 25, maybe 30 at the oldest. But anyway, you all know how that is as you get older. But most of the time when I heard about the end of time coming, it was in a religious manner. It was talking about that, how the world had got bad and, the Lord was going to come back, that kind of stuff. But the other day, I was hurrying about my way. I thought of a different usage. Hey. No, they're still at work. I'm not sure what time they get off. About 5, I guess. No, what do you need? Well, I told you I'd bring them to you. Well, I'll bring you one down. Just give me a few minutes and I'll bring it. Yeah, I'll walk down. Just bring me, just, no, no, don't walk out there because it'll take me a few minutes because I'm doing something I have to finish. So I'll just sit in the house and I'll be there in just a little bit. Okay, bye. So I've heard about the end of time since I was a little girl. As a child, every time the grown-ups talked about it, I got mad. I didn't really get scared, I don't think. I just got mad because I thought, the end of time? I still want to get a boyfriend and go courting. I don't want the end of time to happen. As a middle-aged adult, I realize it's quickly approaching, whether just for me or for the whole world. I just had a birthday and I can't believe I turned 50. I still feel like I'm about 30, maybe at the oldest. Anyway, you know how that is when you get older. But the other day, another usage of the end of time I thought of because it come to my mind. I heard it in my head. I was hurrying around trying to do something, and I don't even remember now what it was exactly that I was trying to do, but it was bothering me. I was worrying. I had too much on my plate. And so in my mind, I said, oh, don't even worry about it. The end of time may happen and you would have done all this worrying for nothing, so just quit worrying about it. There's another similar saying like that Pap used to tell me when I was worrying. He would say, Tipper, don't meet trouble halfway. Let it come to you, and most of the time it'll never show up, is what he would tell me. But anyway, that worrying about the end of time, I've heard that often in my life. People be like, I was going to clean the house, but I thought, why would I bother when the end of time might happen? Just being sarcastic, not that they really believed that, but just kind of in a kid manner, that term used like that. So I started thinking about it and I thought, I wonder if that's like in any of my Appalachian books, in my dictionaries or my dialect books or anything. I searched through all of them and could not find one mention of the end of time. I was dumbstruck. I thought, how could something so common and so Appalachian, I don't know how else to say it, how could it not be in any of those books? But it wasn't in any of them. So I hope you'll leave me a comment and let me know if you're common with that. I mean, if you're familiar with that saying, if it's common in your area, the end of time, either in a religious manner, people worrying about that, or just kind of like, don't worry about it, the end of time might come, and don't worry, there ain't no reason to worry about it now. That way, I hope you'll leave a comment though and tell me if you've heard that before. Also, leave a comment and tell me how you preserve apples. Or heck, if you even like apples. Maybe you don't even like them. I love apples. I eat apples literally every day of the world. I eat an apple. I usually eat one with my breakfast, and then I usually eat an apple, like dried apple snack in the afternoon. So I love apples. I hope you'll share this video with your friends and neighbors. I hope you'll subscribe. But most of all, I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.